What's up guys, Diggle from SGN back with another Mortal Kombat video. This one's going to be Tales of Mortal Kombat Episode 4. I'm going to be talking about Mortal Kombat 4, breaking down all the good things about the game, all the bad things about the game, and really giving it kind of like a review, but not in a classic review format. Anyways, go ahead and jump right into the game, starting off, as always, with the presentation. Now, the first thing that you see in the game is kind of like an intro, but this intro is kind of like a two-parter. The first part is, it looks like it's made with real people, and there's just this weird image of Shinnok. There's this weird image of Raiden, and then there's this weird image of Reptile eating something. And it's just kind of poorly done. It looks really bad, but I guess that's not really the main part of the intro. The really good part of the intro comes after that, where there's this fully animated cutscene of Raiden in the rain talking about what's happening, what's about to go down. He basically explains Shinnok's backstory, explains who he is, and explains what exactly he's trying to do. So that's a pretty welcome thing. And to be honest with you, for a game in 1997, the graphics of that part are actually pretty good. Like, compared to the rest of the game, and I am going to talk about the graphics a little bit later on, but compared to the rest of the game, that looks really good. I mean, the rain, everything is animated pretty well, and Raiden himself, his character model, is actually pretty solid. So that was a pretty solid presentation right there. And once you get to the main menu, the menu is actually pretty nice as well, in my opinion. The colors are pretty good. I like the font. I like the coloring of the writing as well for the Mortal Kombat logo. I do like the various options you have there. So overall, I'm pretty happy with the menu and the intro so far. The music is actually pretty good too. It fits the atmosphere of the game, which is very important, especially for a game like Mortal Kombat, where each game kind of has a different kind of feel to it. Of course, every single time it's, a tournament where people are fighting and there's a lot of death involved. And this one in particular needed a different feel compared to the previous ones, especially the previous two, because obviously Mortal Kombat 3 and Mortal Kombat 2, Shao Kahn, who was an outworld invader, was a very different type of person than the people you're going to be encountering when it comes to NetherRealm. Because this game takes place in the NetherRealm. It takes place, Shinnok is trying to get himself back into power, so you have to go stop him in the NetherRealm. So it has to have a different feel. And I do feel like the music is different enough compared to the previous games to where it does have a different tone, it does have a different feel to the game. And I think it really did a pretty good job of transmitting the type of atmosphere and the type of feeling you have when it comes to dealing with the NetherRealm, which for people who don't know, it is essentially hell. And overall, I like the presentation there. And when you get to the character select screen, that's where things kind of get a little bit iffy, because in my opinion, the character select screen looks pretty bad, and it's not because of the renders themselves, not specifically the renders in a total. Because if you look at the progression of Mortal Kombat games, and I think Total MK did a video about this where he was explaining the differences in the progression over the years of how the character select screen looks. And if you look at it, in like Mortal Kombat 1, 2, 3, I think 4 might be the last one, maybe it was Deadly Alliance. Characters themselves in the select screen actually have their own background. And they do have that in Mortal Kombat 4, and that's a nice little touch. Unfortunately, if you look at the models themselves in the renders, they look like absolute shit. For example, take a look at Liu Kang. He looks awful. What the hell is even going on there? Look at Scorpion. How are you getting Scorpion wrong? He looks awful in that picture. So, in my opinion, everything is good with the presentation except for the character select screen, which, in my opinion, is pretty bad. Like, the renders themselves aren't that bad because there is a background, that's pretty nice, but the character portion of the renders, that is the most important thing, and they're pretty damn bad. So that sucks. But overall, the presentation is pretty satisfying. When it comes to characters, I'm not confused about it, but I'm a little bit torn in whether to call it trash or to call it a pretty solid roster. I think realistically it's somewhere in between, because there are some returning characters that everybody loves. For example, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Johnny Cage, Liu Kang, Sonya, Reptile. There are some interesting characters, of course, Raiden as well. There are some returning characters that everybody loves, so you can't really complain too much about the characters. They also introduced some really interesting ones. For example, for me personally, Reiko is a very interesting character. I know a lot of people don't like him, but I think he has an interesting backstory, and I would like to see him be more fleshed out. Unfortunately, now he's dead in the MKX comics, so it's probably not likely as he's ever going to come back to really get a chance to redeem himself for not being quite as good as he possibly could be. I like the fact that he is Shao Kahn's general. He finds his master, he has some of his powers, and he was, of course, studying under him, so he has quite a few of those moves of his moveset. I like that fact. Of course, he's not as strong as Shao Kahn, but he's still like a less powerful version of him, which gives us the opportunity to use a lot of Shao Kahn's moves in game and not having to just only see them being used by the boss. You know what I mean? I like to see that. I do like that idea. Plus Fujin. Fujin, in my opinion, is probably the best character they introduced in this game because he's an alternative to Raiden. You know, Raiden being the Thunder God, the protector of Earthrealm, he was having some issues, and of course now he reaches Elder God status, which means there has to be a new protector of Earthrealm. Fujin comes in there, and he has similar type of thing. He has a similar look, long gray hair. He has that godlike look, but he has a completely different skill set. He uses wind to his advantage instead of thunder and lightning, and I like that about him. I like everything about Fujin, and I really hope that he comes back in Mortal Kombat 11 because they need to make him relevant. He was in the story mode of Mortal Kombat X. Why wasn't he an actual playable character? Everybody wants him, and Mortal Kombat 4 did a great job of introducing him, and from then, he has pretty much always been a character that everybody wants to see more of, but have never really had that opportunity. And of course, there are some other characters that are kind of garbage. For example, Kai, Jarek, and Tanya. They aren't very interesting. It's just because compared to other characters we're used to, they're not that cool. Like Kai is just he's this regular Shaolin monk. He's kind of like the replacement for Liu Kang, but everybody already has Liu Kang, so there's really no reason for that. Plus, Jarek is essentially Kano, so there's really no reason for that. Tanya is a bit different. Tanya could potentially be a little bit more interesting, but overall, that's just my feelings, of course. You might like the characters, and that's fine. These are just my opinions. Moving on to the graphics, and I gotta say, like I said earlier, the graphics of the game are pretty garbage, except for Radiant's intro, where that looked pretty good. Everything else about the game looks pretty poor. The character models in particular in-game are very, very bad. Like, they kind of look like just clumps of clay molded into human forms and with almost zero detail. And I get it. Okay, it was 1997, and this was their very first time making a game with actual handmade graphics, not using digitized characters, not using digitized backgrounds. So I get it. It was a very different thing for them to do, and it was a very different task, and it was just very... I'm not even going to say like it was worse quality in terms of the hardware they were working with, because that seems to be the case, because arcade machines were obviously more powerful. They didn't have to load anything, so it was a different type of situation. So I don't give them too many faults when it comes to how bad the graphics were from that point of view, but I think there's a lot of things that they could have worked on. For example, a lot of the costumes were really bad. In my opinion, Scorpion has a really bad costume, just to make an example. I think Quan Chi had an awful costume as well. So overall, there's a lot of things they could have done. But if you're looking at the character models for what they are extremely poor. They look very, very bad, and that can't be just skipped over. Of course, it was 1997, so you don't expect great graphics, but you expect something better than that from Mortal Kombat, in my opinion. And then, of course, there are some special effects in the game that are pretty good. For example, Raiden's lightning effects. I'm not necessarily talking about the ones that he shoots out of his hands or things like that, not his special moves. I'm talking about the lightning that goes around his body. That looks pretty good. I'm not going to complain about that. That looks pretty good. But there's a lot of other special moves. For example, Scorpion Spear, where it's like, it goes like this. Like, why would a spear go like that when it's supposed to go straight into somebody and plunge into them? That's just my opinion. I'm not an expert in kunai, so I might be wrong about that. But in my opinion, that seems pretty shit. There's a lot of other special moves in the game. I'm not going to go ahead and list them all, because for the most part, they do look bad. But if you look at it for like 10 minutes, you'll pretty much see what I mean. Just about everything from animations to character models, it all looks really bad. One of the things that kind of save the game in a slight way are the backdrops into the arenas. The backdrops aren't too bad. Some of the stages look okay. For example, there's one that's pretty interesting, which is just this weird blue face that's screaming, and it kind of fits like this weird feeling of another realm. It's kind of like that's a tortured soul who's stuck in a wall, who is screaming for all eternity. That kind of fits. But there's a lot of other arenas that are just kind of there. It's just a wall in the background with some fire and some skulls, and that's unfortunately a lot of the arenas in this game. So there's a few that are interesting, but for the most part they're also really boring, but they are probably the best looking thing in the game, which goes to show you how poor the game is in general in terms of its graphics and in terms of how it looks in game. Like I said, the intro looks good, so I don't know why maybe they weren't able to get in-game graphics to be quite as good as that intro. Maybe it was just too heavy or something like that, and it kind of works for a cutscene. You see it a lot with modern games as well. Cutscenes tend to look better, so I'm assuming that's the case, but still, I would have liked to see something a little bit better, but it is what it is. I think compared to digitized graphics, it was always going to be a failure in terms of how good the graphics are going to look. Anytime you go from a more powerful machine like the arcades to using essentially human graphics, because all the characters were humans, all the backdrops were actual cities, all actual things taken from real life, implemented into a game. So that really does make it look better, and realistically, like I said, this game was always going to look bad compared to, say, the arcade machines. Moving on to the gameplay, and I gotta confess to you guys, this is the hardest part for me to judge, because I haven't played a lot of Mortal Kombat 4. Like, I played it a long time ago, and I didn't play a lot of it, because as I've mentioned before, and as I mentioned in my video where I ranked every single Mortal Kombat game from the main series in order of which ones I like the most and which ones I dislike, there's a reason why this game was next to last, above only Mortal Kombat vs. DC, and that's only because I don't actually consider Mortal Kombat vs. DC to be part of the main series. It's a completely different thing. Of the main series, like of the actual main series without a gimmick in it, this is by far the worst one, and there's a reason for it. The gameplay, of course, the graphics, the gameplay in my opinion sucks. Like, I'm not gonna lie, there's some of it is interesting enough. For example, the gameplay is still fast. I appreciate that. The fighting is fast, the combos are all pretty quick, and it's fun to play in that point of view. For the first little bit, it's fun to play because it is a quick game. It's not sluggish, and that is something to give them props for. Unfortunately, it's not very fluid. Like, it's fast and it seems fluid, but it's really not. A lot of it is broken. For example, they did add quite a few interesting things. In theory, adding weapons is a pretty cool thing. For example, like, you can pick up a weapon, and that gives you a damage boost, and it's something that you can do, and it adds a bit of depth to the game, it adds a bit of more complication to it, and it simply adds a different little thing and strategically that you have to take into consideration. Unfortunately, if you're playing against the AI, and you think, alright, there's a weapon right there, I'm going to pick it up and do some monster damage, that is pretty much a death sentence. Because as soon as you pick up that weapon, you are absolutely screwed. That guy's going to turn into this kind of like passive AI character to becoming Cain Velasquez. And if you don't know who Cain Velasquez is, I'm going to leave some highlights in the description down below and check that dude out. He's an absolute monster. He turns into Cain Velasquez, he's immediately into your face, beating the hell out of you, and you immediately drop the weapon. Drop the sword, drop whatever weapon it is that you have in your hand. And that sucks, because you pretty much never get the opportunity to, because as soon as you grab the weapon, you're just going to have somebody in your face, and you can't do anything with it. It's really frustrating, because the AI goes from being passive to being the extreme, aggressive, piece of shit AI that honestly this game has. Like, that's really, really frustrating. The way that it just changes like that as soon as you pick up a weapon is very, very annoying. It kind of does, it makes you feel like it's absolutely useless to have the weapons, and that's a big negative in my opinion. Then, of course, there's the fact that they do have some positives to the gameplay, and that's not really in terms of gameplay itself, it's more in terms of modes. For example, they have quite a few of them, like arcade mode, of course, arcade mode, classic one, but also they have 2v2, which was a welcome, it was welcome to see that coming back from Mortal Kombat 3. A lot of people love 2v2, I love 2v2, so it was nice to see that there. Of course, it wasn't like tag team from Mortal Kombat 9, it was a much different thing, but 2v2 is still a pretty welcome thing because it adds variety. They also had endurance mode, which was pretty cool. Like, it's not my favorite mode, of course. I'm not going to go out there and play it. I'm not going to play Mortal Kombat 4 anytime soon. But it is something there. And they also had, they had team mode. So they did have a few things as well as tournament mode. They had a few modes there. And anytime they add variety, I say this all the time, it's a very welcome thing. Because a lot of times these games, they have 1, 2, maybe even 3 modes, but they're not really all that fun, and they don't really have anything different for you to experience. Whereas Mortal Kombat 4, at the very least, being a poor game, it still did have a few modes, which, of course, is very, very acceptable. Now, in terms of like comparing the gameplay from Mortal Kombat 4 compared to Mortal Kombat 3, Mortal Kombat 2, in my opinion, it's just not on par. Like, Mortal Kombat 2, as sluggish as it was in a lot of ways, it was still fun. Like, it was still very fun, and just the overall game was very, very fun. Whereas Mortal Kombat 4, unfortunately, in terms of gameplay, in terms of graphics, in terms of presentation, all that stuff, it's not quite as good as Mortal Kombat 3 or Mortal Kombat 4, especially gameplay-wise. I think it takes a big step backwards, and of course, graphically. Moving on to the story, the storyline in Mortal Kombat 4, in theory, is actually pretty good. Like, I really like the idea of a fallen Elder God being banished to another realm, and then managing to escape, along with a lot of his worshippers, a lot of the Brotherhood of Shadows characters. I like that a lot. But the execution was rather poor. And it's a common theme with Mortal Kombat 4, that there's a lot of good ideas there, and it's just executed very poorly. Like, in my opinion, there are certain subplots in the game that are just borderline stupid. I'm not going to go into all of them, but there's a few there that are just really, really stupid. You can look them up if you want to. And unfortunately, Shinnok, like, as cool as the character could possibly be, because he's essentially the devil. And actually, that's not quite true, because essentially Shinnok took the throne of the Netherrealm from the devil himself, from Satan. So he's actually more powerful than the devil, and that's really, really cool. I like that about him. Unfortunately, a lot of people hate the character for a few reasons. I'm going to go ahead and list them. Number one, he was an actual character on the main roster. And anytime a character who's a major boss is on the main roster, they just don't feel that powerful. They feel weaker than like Shao Kahn or Goro was at the time, or Shang Tsung even in Mortal Kombat 1. They don't feel like they're this special character. They just kind of feel like they're a character on the main roster because they have to balance it. They can't just have this super powerful guy on the main roster and not have him balanced. So he's just kind of there. He doesn't feel like he's this crazy character, except for the fact that he has this boost in terms of how good he is and how much damage he does. So he doesn't really feel special. He just kind of feels cheesy. There's nothing good about that. Of course, his look also is pretty stupid looking. Like, a lot of people compare him to a clown, and really, he does kind of look like a clown. Like, in MKX, he looks a bit better, but in MK4, he looked really stupid. Like, I have to admit that. But I do like the character, so I'm not going to fault them too much on that. I like the story of him. It's just the execution, as always, with this game was pretty poor, and that's just pretty much it. When it comes to the story, when it comes to everything, I mean, the storyline itself is okay. It's just there's just nothing special about it. And going into my final thoughts, overall, I think that Mortal Kombat 4 on paper, what they were shooting for, what they were trying to accomplish, it was probably a pretty good game on paper. Unfortunately, the presentation was good, except for the character screen, so I'm not going to complain about that. I like the music. I like pretty much everything from the intro to the music to the main menu. I like all that stuff. I'm not going to complain about that. Graphics, it's really poor, especially when you compare it to the previous games. The gameplay is poor compared to the previous games as well. The story, it had some potential, but the execution was really bad. It wasn't a satisfying game. Overall, the game is just not satisfactory, especially when you compare it to Mortal Kombat 3 or Mortal Kombat 2. Mortal Kombat 1 was, I'm not going to say it's a great game because it has a lot of issues, because obviously it was the first game in the series. It was a very low budget. It was just 3 dudes developing it. So it is what it is. But this game still managed to be underwhelming for that. And if you look at this game like individually, if it wasn't a Mortal Kombat game, if it was just any other game series, if it was his own series, something like that, it was just kind of like people were trying to copy Mortal Kombat and they had their own characters and things like that, it probably wouldn't have been a bad game. It wouldn't have been a good one. It wouldn't have been something special. It wouldn't have been on Mortal Kombat's level or Street Fighter or anything like that. But unfortunately for the game, it is compared to its predecessors. And that means that the game has to be compared to Mortal Kombat 3, Mortal Kombat 2, which means that this game is extremely underwhelming and it's extremely unsatisfactory. And it's just a poor game compared to the rest of the series. That is it for this video. I want you to let me know in the comment section down below what you think of the things I said. Do you agree with me that the game is underwhelming and unsatisfactory, or do you think it's actually a good game? What positives do you think I forgot? What cons do you think I maybe left out? What do you think? Let me know all these things in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, please smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell if you want to get notified every time a video comes out, which is pretty much the only way that YouTube will give me any kind of credit. And also, please share the video. That is extremely helpful, and I appreciate every single person who does that. Once again, guys, thank you so much to every single one of my subscribers. Thank you so much, especially to the people that comment all the time. And once again, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.